On March 15, 2023, Saudi Arabia made a decision that should have shaken the world, and yet most Americans didn't notice. For the first time in nearly 5 decades, the kingdom agreed to accept Chinese yuan for its oil sales instead of the US dollar. A quiet announcement, but it shattered a 49-year-old system that had allowed America to enjoy a financial advantage unlike any other in history. The petrodollar monopoly, the backbone of U.S. global economic power, was broken. What does this mean for the dollar, for your savings, for the world economy? Few understand the gravity of this shift. History shows that no dominant currency lasts forever, and every empire that thought it was untouchable eventually faced its reckoning. This isn't just a trade deal, it's the opening act of a global economic drama, and we are already in the audience as the stage begins to shift. The question isn't if the US dollar will lose its dominance, but when, and more importantly, how it will reshape the wealth and power of nations, including yours. To understand why this moment matters, we need to look at the system that gave America decades of unparalleled advantage, the petrodollar. Since the 1970s, oil, the lifeblood of the global economy, has been priced and traded in dollars. This created a constant global demand for American currency, a demand that allowed the United States to borrow cheaply, print money without immediate consequences, and export its inflation across the world. Being the issuer of the world's reserve currency is more than prestige. It's an extraordinary economic weapon. It let America buy real goods from other nations with nothing but printed paper, maintain living standards far beyond what its economy could naturally support, and wield unmatched financial power. But history shows that no dominant currency lasts forever. The Portuguese real, the Dutch guilder, the British pound, they all seemed permanent once, too strong to ever fail. Yet over time, cracks appeared, competitors emerged, confidence weakened, and alternatives gained traction. The cycle repeated, and today the US dollar faces the same invisible pressures. What was once America's free lunch may soon become a costly inheritance. To truly grasp what's happening today, we need to turn back the clock and see how history has played out before. Centuries of global trade show a repeating pattern. Every dominant currency eventually collapses. The Portuguese real ruled the spice trade, the Dutch guilder financed empires, and the British pound commanded the world's commerce. Each empire believed it was untouchable, certain that their currency's dominance was permanent. Portugal controlled the seas, securing spices worth more than gold, and every trader needed their coins to buy pepper, cinnamon, and clothes. The Dutch, with their unmatched financial networks in Amsterdam, managed trade across Europe, Asia, and the New World. Britain's industrial and naval power turned the pound into the ultimate symbol of global influence. And yet, despite all their might, cracks formed. Wars drained resources, competitors arose, financial systems faltered. Each empire thought it was different, immune to the forces that had toppled the ones before. They were wrong.
History doesn't lie. Patterns emerge, and when they do, they signal not just the fall of a currency, but the sweeping transformation of global wealth and power. What happened to Portugal, the Netherlands, and Britain is a story that echoes today, and the dollar is now following the same script. Every reserve currency begins with dominance. It starts not with luck, but with unmatched economic and military power. Portugal rose by controlling the spice trade, its ships ruling the seas from Mozambique to Macau. The Portuguese real became indispensable, the currency everyone needed to participate in global commerce. The Dutch followed, building a financial empire that stretched across Europe and Asia. Amsterdam became the world's trading capital, the Bank of Amsterdam the safest place to store wealth, and the guilder the currency of choice for merchants everywhere. Then came Britain, whose industrial might and naval supremacy allowed the pound to dominate global trade. Its colonies, fleets, and financial institutions created trust that seemed unshakable. After World War II, America inherited this mantle. With half of the world's GDP, unmatched military strength, and a dollar backed by gold, the United States became the center of global finance. Every step along this path shows the same truth. Dominance isn't given, it's built through strength, innovation, and control. But as history shows, dominance is only the beginning, and every beginning carries the seeds of eventual decline. Dominance brings power, but power can blind. At the peak, empires overextend. Portugal fought wars it could barely afford, trying to maintain garrisons across distant ports. The Dutch, masters of global trade, found themselves locked in endless conflicts with England and France, draining their wealth. Britain, at the height of its empire, maintained the largest navy in history while borrowing heavily to sustain its global ambitions. Even America faced the same pattern. The Vietnam War, Cold War spending, and post-2008 debt surges showed that power comes at a cost. Yet, the dollar remained strong, held up by inertia and global dependence. The world still needed it, and that kept the currency afloat, even as underlying fundamentals weakened. Peak power looks invincible from the outside, but inside, cracks are forming, and the stage is set for competitors to rise. As dominant powers stretch themselves thin, rivals begin to rise. They don't topple the empire immediately, but they quietly build alternatives. The Dutch challenged Portugal. London grew as a financial hub to rival Amsterdam, and later America emerged as Britain's rival. These competitors observed weakness and prepared systems that could one day reduce dependence on the dominant currency. Today, we see the same pattern. China developed the CIPS system. Russia created SPFS, and BRICS nations discuss a common currency. None of these alternatives are meant to overthrow the dollar overnight, but they signal a shift. The seeds of competition are planted, and history shows that once these systems gain traction, the dominant currency can no longer hold unchallenged supremacy. When dominance is challenged, empires often fight back by weaponizing their currency. Sanctions are imposed, assets are frozen, and access to global financial systems is restricted. The goal is to punish adversaries, but history shows this strategy often backfires. Nations under attack accelerate their own alternatives, while neutral countries realize their vulnerability and begin diversifying. Portugal tried to control trade ports to block rivals, only to push them into creating their own networks. Britain's financial weaponization during wars undermined trust in the pound. Today, America followed the same path. Sanctions on Russia in 2014 and the freezing of $300 billion in reserves in 2022 were meant to enforce power. Instead, they triggered a global awakening. Countries saw that dollars could be restricted, reserves could be seized, and the world began moving toward alternatives. The very weapon meant to preserve dominance was now accelerating the rise of competitors. Once rivals emerge and weaponization backfires, cracks in confidence begin to appear. The world starts questioning the reliability of the dominant currency. History repeats itself. The Dutch guilder lost trust after British blockades. The British pound fell after World War I and the Great Depression. These declines didn't happen overnight. They started slowly, but once momentum built, the fall became inevitable. The US dollar is now showing the same pattern. Its reserve share has slipped from 71% in 1999 to 58% in 2024. Even small declines accelerate the spiral. Confidence, once broken, is hard to restore. Merchants, central banks, and nations begin hedging against risk, exploring alternatives, and the network effect that once favored the dollar starts to weaken.
The stage is set for the next phase, where alternatives gain critical mass and the system begins to shift rapidly. Once confidence cracks, alternatives begin to gain real momentum. Network effects, which once favored the dominant currency, start to flip. Merchants and nations prefer systems that are more widely accepted, more reliable, and offer better access. What was once a slow trickle of alternatives now begins to swell into a wave. In history, the Dutch guilder overtook the Portuguese real as trade networks expanded, and London replaced Amsterdam as Europe's financial hub. Today, the shift is already underway. China's CIPS system doubled its transaction volume in just 3 years. BRICS nations plan a common currency, while bilateral trade agreements bypass the dollar entirely. Saudi Arabia accepting Yuan for oil is another signal that the system is tilting. The spiral accelerates. Once merchants and countries begin choosing alternatives over dollars, the decline becomes unstoppable. The danger zone is here, and the world is entering a new era of financial competition. Once alternatives reach critical mass, a crisis can trigger panic, and the collapse accelerates. Wars, financial shocks, policy mistakes, any of these can spark a sudden rush to abandon the dominant currency. Countries dump reserves, sell dollars, and seek safer options, creating a rapid downward spiral. For the U.S., several potential triggers loom. The launch of a BRICS-backed gold currency could provide a credible alternative for oil and trade. A debt crisis with $36 trillion in federal obligations could shake global confidence. Military overextension, whether in Taiwan, Ukraine, or the Middle East, could expose vulnerabilities. Even a banking collapse from commercial real estate defaults might trigger panic. In each scenario, dollars could plummet 30 to 50% within months. The world would scramble to secure alternatives, and the dominance of the dollar could unravel almost overnight. The stage is set for a dramatic, unavoidable turning point. After the storm of crisis, a new system emerges. The old currency doesn't disappear overnight, but it loses its global dominance. History shows that this transition can take years, sometimes a decade or more, as the world adjusts to new standards. The Portuguese real gave way to the Dutch guilder, the guilder to the British pound, and the pound to the US dollar. Today, the replacement for the dollar is still uncertain. It could be the Chinese yuan if its economy continues to grow and its payment systems gain trust. It could be a multipolar world where the euro, yuan, and dollar coexist regionally. Or it could be a gold-backed BRICS currency, offering a neutral, stable alternative. Whatever the outcome, the message is clear. The era of single currency dominance ends, and a new global financial order begins to take shape. The collapse of the petrodollar is not like the declines of the real, guilder, or pound. This time, the fall will be faster, sharper, and more global. Technology accelerates everything. In the past, moving gold or reserves took weeks or months. Today, billions can be shifted in seconds with digital finance. Countries can dump dollars, buy gold, or switch to alternative currencies almost instantly.
Multiple alternatives already exist: the yuan, the euro, cryptocurrencies, and a potential BRICS-backed currency mean nations don't have to wait for a replacement. They can diversify immediately. The petrodollar itself was artificially sustained by a political agreement with Saudi Arabia, not by pure economic dominance. Once that political foundation weakens, the system unravels. Add to this the enormous U.S. debt, the interconnectedness of global finance, and the speed of modern transactions, and the collapse becomes inevitable, rapid, and worldwide. Unlike previous transitions, this one will shake every corner of the globe almost immediately. Looking at the timeline, the stages of the dollar's decline are already unfolding. From 2000 to 2008, the dollar was at its peak, unchallenged, dominating global trade with the petrodollar creating structural demand. The financial crisis of 2008 to 2014 damaged confidence, and countries like China began quietly building alternative systems.
Between 2014 and 2022, sanctions on Russia, combined with unprecedented money printing, accelerated concern. Russia reduced dollar reserves, increased gold holdings, and developed its own payment system, while China expanded its global influence. By 2023, Saudi Arabia accepted yuan for oil, breaking the petrodollar monopoly. Reserve share began to decline, and central banks globally started buying gold at record rates. Today, we are entering stage 6, where alternatives gain critical mass and network effects start flipping. If the historical pattern holds, the next stages, panic, accelerated collapse, and eventual replacement, could unfold between 2025 and 2050. The signs are clear, the pattern is visible, and the window to understand and act is now. As the dollar's dominance fades, certain players stand to benefit enormously. Gold holders are at the front of the line, their assets surging as global uncertainty drives demand. BRICS nations, including China, Russia, India, Brazil, and new members like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, gain unprecedented economic independence. They can trade in currencies of their choice, diversify reserves, and protect themselves from sanctions, shifting the balance of global power. Commodity exporters also benefit. Oil, gas, metals, and food can now be sold in multiple currencies, giving producers more leverage and the ability to demand better prices. Nations with strong economies and low debt, like Switzerland, Norway, Singapore, and Germany, attract capital fleeing a weakening dollar, positioning themselves as safe havens. In this new era, these winners are not just protected, they are empowered, reshaping the global financial map while others scramble to adapt. As the dollar's dominance fades, certain players stand to hurt harshly. America, the architect of the dollar's dominance, is set to lose the privilege it has enjoyed for decades. The so-called exorbitant privilege ends. Living standards that were inflated by the ability to print money and buy goods from the world at low cost will decline sharply. Dollar holders, anyone with savings, treasuries, or bank accounts, will see their purchasing power fall by 30 to 50%. Countries holding dollar-denominated debt will struggle as repayments become more expensive and financial strain intensifies. The U.S. financial sector faces its own reckoning. New York may no longer be the undisputed global financial capital as transactions shift to Shanghai, Frankfurt, or Dubai. The ability of the U.S. government to fund deficits collapses when foreign nations no longer need dollars. Trillions in wealth will transfer from dollar holders to those holding gold, alternative currencies, or assets in resilient economies. This transition is not just local, it reshapes the world. A multipolar currency system is emerging. The dollar may fall to 35 to 40% of global trade. The euro could hold 20 to 25%, a BRICS currency 15 to 20%, and gold will reclaim its role as a store of value. Trade flows will shift, inflation pressures will realign, and geopolitical power will redistribute. The cycle is inevitable. History doesn't repeat perfectly, but it rhymes. Just as the Portuguese, Dutch, and British experienced, patterns of dominance and decline are unstoppable. The 8-stage pattern of reserve currency collapse has played out 3 times in history, and now it's happening with the US dollar. Stage 6 is here. Alternatives are gaining critical mass, and the petrodollar monopoly has already been broken. The spiral is accelerating, and the next decade will determine how fast the dollar loses its dominance. If this has revealed a pattern you never noticed before, if you now understand that reserve currencies follow a clear cycle of rise and fall, then paying attention is no longer optional. Track each stage, watch BRICS developments, monitor the signals of dollar decline, and position yourself accordingly. The world is moving toward a multipolar currency era, and those who understand it will navigate it successfully. The dollar's dominance is ending. History is repeating itself, and the time to act is now.